In this lecture, we're going to talk about using research and reason in the field of education. So let's start by thinking about going to the doctor. So you're sick or you have some kind of medical condition and you visit your doctor. You just automatically expect that whatever treatment the doctor comes up with is going to be effective in curing whatever the problem is that you're having. You expect him or her to know why he picks a particular medicine to use for your treatment. We also assume that the doctor can summarize his knowledge about the data that he's collected in your appointment or otherwise to lead to the decision for treatment. We also believe that he's going to have just general knowledge about medical science, probably that we don't have. And overall, we're going to assume that the data supports the treatment. So if we are having a sinus infection, or if you're like me and I have a thyroid issue, and so I have to have blood work collected every so many weeks, I just trust that my doctor knows how to look at that blood work result and then know how to tweak my medication so that I'm getting the medication I need. Now think about the field of architecture. Even an architect depends on scientific information. Architects have to apply foundational principles of engineering and certain fields of science in order to be effective at their job. Whether they're designing something completely on their own or giving input on a project, if they don't have that scientific knowledge base and then apply it, whatever they build might be beautiful, but it won't stand, or it won't make it through the next storm, or whatever. So they have to be knowledgeable about scientific concepts. Just the same way as a physician or as an architect, you are a teacher. And too often, we don't give teachers and your career fields the respect of professionalism that it deserves. You have this major responsibility and you are being trained to do a professional career. And so likewise, if your lesson planning is not based on what we've learned from scientific research and that process, your lessons will fail. They will not be as effective, and what you're trying to do about training future students will just not pan out the way that we hope that it will. Here's the problem. We believe that in general in society that, teaching is, well, I went to school, so therefore I know how to do it. And I'm not trying to dismiss homeschooling co-ops or anything like that. But what I am saying to you is that by earning a degree, you are entering a professional career path, and you are becoming knowledgeable about this to a depth that someone who doesn't have a degree like yours does not have. The practices in which too many teachers and schools engage in curriculum choices and decision choices for the classroom are not firmly grounded in science. And oftentimes they don't have the evidence that they need to support those choices. This is a problem. And my hope is that every student that has me understands that they need to be professional and think about research-based practices when they're making instructional decisions about their classroom. You, the future teacher, need to be an effective consumer, and you need to learn how to think scientifically about creating and teaching lessons that are effective. You only have so much time with your students, and you have a lot of responsibilities in your classroom. And so we want to make sure that you are maximizing your effectiveness by learning from previous research and previous educators. Too often teachers are taught that, hey, anything goes in the field of education because you should base your teaching philosophy on your intuition, your gut instinct. You know what's right, you know what's good. And while that's true to an extent, that gut instinct should come from a place of knowledge and a place of experience and a place of thinking about what research says about teaching. Too often, teachers think that the latest fad or trend will work. And I don't know why we fall into this with teaching. And especially now in the age of social media where things can be shared so easily. We see things that are cutesy or look fun, and we think like, yeah, I want to do that in my classroom. And sometimes that's totally fine. But all I'm asking is that you just need to step back for a second and think, hey, why would I want to do this? Just because it's fun or because there's actually research to prove that this is a good use of my instructional time? Here's an example. For a while, there was something called, well, you might even still see this today, something called the Infinity Walk. And the Infinity Walk was used to diagnose reading problems and monitor how to teach children in learning how to read. So when you think of the infinity symbol, it's like a figure 8 symbol. And so the basic idea here is that teachers would have kids walk in this shape to see if they could read. And so they would read while they walked in this shape. And if kids could do it, or if kids could not do it, they would say, oh, this kid has a problem with reading. We need to come up with large motor exercises to help them do better. This is not grounded in scientific research. Being able to walk in a figure 8 while reading a book has nothing to do with your ability to read and understand text. Don't be gullible. Certain methods work better than others. Challenge yourself to be a teacher who wants to be known as someone who uses research to inform their instruction. Be responsible and figure it out for yourself. Your parents and your students are worth this approach to teaching. But I will warn you, it may not be popular among your coworkers who don't feel the same way, and instead look for trends or the newest ideas or fads to use. And sometimes the trends are scientifically researched, and then that's great. But if they're not, you need to be willing to stand up for that. But let me emphasize that teaching is an art and a science. I get it, because teaching is an art. You can't just hand a scripted curriculum to a person and have them read it and think that that's good teaching. And that exists out there. But what I want you to know that there is the ability to share information in a way that is engaging and differentiated and thinks about other learners as well. Educators have only recently considered that they should look to science to think about curriculum choices. And there is much resistance to this practice. But I encourage you to start being an advocate for this in your future school systems. Education overall will suffer and it will lose respect if its primary model for resolving conflict or test scores or whatever the issues are is based in politics rather than in science. Because of the way that education is set up in our country, it's always going to have a political influence. And even though it's regulated to states, there's going to be federal input and then state mandates that you have to follow. And as governors change and as political parties switch back and forth, different political parties are going to want to push different agendas. But at the end of it, you need to say, okay, I will follow guidelines, but I want to make sure the choices I'm making are actually scientifically based. Federal mandate even says that your teaching methods have to be based in science. Okay, so just to clarify, I'm not talking just about like, oh, you have to use science concepts. What I'm talking about is using the research process to inform us whether or not instructional practices work in a classroom. And I'm going to cover what that means in the next few slides. So what we need in education is the same practices that we use in medical science, in physical science, and other professional career fields. That there are 3 things that we look for: peer review of publications, replication of results by other researchers, and then this overall consensus within a particular community about whether there is converging evidence that points towards a particular conclusion. In part 2 of this lecture, I'm going to explain what each of these 3 things means in the classroom and in the field of research.